Although it seemed too mystical to be true, Sunny knew that the answer to that question was a resounding yes. After all, Sun God had twisted the fates of the Chain Lords in on themselves to make Noctis, Sylvain, Severax, and the rest immortal. Weaver, meanwhile, had woven the strings of fate to create the nightmare spell. So, Sunny, the inheritor of Weaver's lineage, could weave the strings of fate, as well. In theory. In practice, he had sensed something when touching the thread of golden light. It had felt like a physical object in his grasp, but it had also felt absolutely immovable. Not inherently so, but simply because it weighed as much as the world itself did. Moving that single string of fate, for him, was no different from an ant attempting to move a mountain with its feeble limbs. That is probably something only a divine being can do. Even then, not just any divine being, and among those great beings that could twist the strings of fate, none had been able to escape it, in the end, so the measure of their influence must have been limited. I feel like this is something I am not qualified to understand yet, let alone perform. In the future, though. The future did not exist anymore, so anything was possible. Satisfied with that conclusion, he thought back to the very fact that the great tapestry of fate was torn and savaged. It felt too peculiar to fathom, knowing that he was the person, or the weapon, at least, who had fundamentally altered one of the inherent pillars of existence. Among all of his accomplishments, that one stood out as the most distinguished by far. So much so that nothing else could even compare. Granted, the vile thieving bird deserved most of the credit, possibly followed by Weaver. Cassie and Sunny had done their part, and what they had done was nearly impossible, but it did not feel entirely, or even largely, like an achievement of their own. So, Sunny was not going to let it go to his head. Still, while the question of who had unraveled the tapestry of fate remained, the implications of its unraveling were apparent. The future, which had been determined all along, flowing toward a predestined end, even if the details of how the world arrived at that end could shift, was undecided and malleable now. Leaving the astonishing nature of that tectonic shift aside, it seemed like a positive change. But really, it was not necessarily so. After all, there were countless possible futures now. Some of them could be more beneficial than what had been fated to transpire, but some were undoubtedly far more horrible. There was simply no way to tell, since Sunny did not know what shape the original future had been meant to take, and there was no way to learn what final shape it would settle into anymore. For better or worse, they would only find out what the future held when it was upon them. They would only know if their intervention was a blessing or a bitter curse when there was no way to change it. The future was just, uncertain and free, containing myriad possibilities. So, it was up to Sunny and his companions to make sure that the future that ended up being realized was more hopeful than dreadful. That heavy responsibility suited him fine. Even if they failed in the end, and the world was consumed by the nightmare that the forgotten god was dreaming, he would at least know that they had strived for and failed to achieve a better ending themselves, not guided like puppets that performed a complicated play as their limbs were pulled by the strings of fate. The tapestry of fate may repair itself eventually, restoring a semblance of order, but it would never be the same. Letting out a mental sigh, Sunny turned his thoughts to the visions he had seen. Repose. It was a startling thing to learn, that the demon of repose was responsible for creating the very concept of changing seasons and had either caused or ended an ice age that threatened to consume all of Exis. Tense, or perhaps both. It was also deeply fascinating to have witnessed the ancient past of the Heart Realm, especially considering that Sunny was currently waging a war for dominance over its charred remains. The burned forest had been the sacred forest once, and the unfathomably large stump at its center had been the world tree, the avatar of Heart God. Heart God. The god of souls, emotions, memory, growth, and hunger. That deity was the most nebulous and elusive of the 6 great gods, so Sunny had rarely stumbled upon traces of Heart God before. There was Ader of the Chain Lords and the desecrated grove, from where the sapling of the sacred tree empowering the Chainbreaker came. There was the tree to which Uris and Azarax had been nailed for thousands of years, and which had prevented them from forgetting themselves like the rest of the deathless prisoners of the Nightmare Desert. There was the burned forest. There was the Soul Devourer, as well, which, as Sunny suspected now, was a sacred tree that had grown in the wake of the Doom War and succumbed to corruption. It was interesting to note, however, that the world tree had been similar to the soul devourer in numerous ways. It had attracted numerous beings with the sweet scent of its fruit, after all, and numerous of those beings remained in the heart realm forever, helping the great tree grow and its offspring form the sacred forest. Just like Sunny, Nephice, and Cassie had almost remained on the ashen barrow to guard the soul devourer and help it spread its seeds forever. The vision Sunny saw possessed a strange duality to it, so he could not tell if the avatar of Heart God had been benevolent and nurturing or harrowing. Maybe it was both. The gods were beings born long before the concepts of good and evil, after all, and therefore existed outside of the confines of mundane morality. So, they were both and neither. The world tree and the sacred forest seemed to have found a state of balance eventually, though, after experiencing the long and frightening Ice Age, with the help of the demon of repose. Only to burn in the end. Suddenly, Sunny remembered the descriptions of two memories he had received a long time ago, the memory of ice, and the memory of fire. They had been charms that increased his resistance to cold and heat, respectively, which he lost after being banished from the nightmare spell. The description of the first had read, even when the sun returned, they shivered and remembered the never-ending winter. While the description of the latter hinted at a different calamity, and then, there was nothing but flame. The descriptions were peculiar and fragmented, like two pieces of a larger whole. Sunny had even thought that if he could find the whole set of resistance charms, he would be able to learn the entire story. Now, he suspected that this story told the tale of the inhabitants of the sacred forest, the primordial humans and the creatures who had dwelled in the heart realm, and who probably built the barrows on the northern edges of the forgotten shore. The god of memory was gone, and these people were long gone, as well. Now, the only thing that remembered them was the nightmare spell. How fitting. The latest _AP_SODIes are on _thenovelfire.net. A few days later, the storm subsided, revealing the starlit sky. The vast expanse of rolling water glistened with a silver radiance, reflecting the shimmering stars. Wisps of mist flowed above the water like clouds, making it seem as if the night garden was suspended between two nebulous heavens. Sunny was starting to feel better by then. Abandoning the peaceful embrace of Jet's shadow, he ventured to explore the ship, not because he expected to find something important, but simply out of curiosity. Avoiding the gazes of people living on the night garden, he moved stealthily here and there, eventually making his way to the lowest part of the living vessel. Quite ironic. There was a small sea hidden at the bottom of the night garden. Well, more of a lake, really. A vast reservoir spanned the entire length of the gigantic ship, filled with water. There was a shore of pristine white dunes, as well. Enchanted lanterns were scattered across the ceiling of the reservoir, shining upon the black water like stars. It was a perfect microcosm of the restless sea outside. Kneeling on the white sand, Sunny brought a handful of it to his face and licked it. A strange expression appeared on his face. Salt? Soft steps resounded from the darkness behind him, and Jet appeared on the silent shore, stretching as she raised a hand to hide a yawn. Each storm was a test of endurance for the captain of the night garden, so she had not had an opportunity to rest even for a minute until the storm subsided. Noticing his confused expression, she nodded. Yes, it's salt. Jet walked over to the water and splashed some on her face. The hull of the night garden absorbs salt water from the sea, purifies it, and then desalinates it. Once all contaminants are absorbed, the fresh water and the salt are stored separately in this reservoir. Where did you think people aboard the ship got water from? Sunny scratched his head. I haven't really thought about it. That's quite convenient. J.E. T nodded. If not for that function, sustaining a large population here would have been a logistical nightmare. As it stands, though, we are almost self-sufficient. We even supply salt to other cities in the Dream Realm, so everyone on the coast is happy to see the night garden appear on the horizon. Salt was the lifeblood of civilization, after all. Sunny glanced around with a thoughtful expression. Does it happen automatically, or do you control the water intake from the runic hall? Jet shrugged. The night garden handles it on its own. But I imagine I could take direct control and do it manually if I wanted to. That is how it works with most of its other functions. Why? Sunny looked up, studied the distant ceiling for a while, and then shook his head. Nothing, really. It's just that this reservoir is far from being filled to the brim. So, I was thinking that it looks like a ballast tank. Jet studied him for a few seconds. Like in a submarine? He nodded. Exactly. I am willing to bet that if you increased water intake and flooded this reservoir, the night garden would be able to dive into the depths. That is how it works, right? It only has to become heavier than the water it displaces to achieve negative buoyancy. Sunny paused for a moment, then added, I am also willing to bet that the same barrier that protects the main deck from the wind and the rain can hold the water at bay, creating a bubble of breathable air around the ship. Oh. I don't have proof for any of that, of course. But it feels like something the night garden would be able to do. Jet gave him a suspicious look. Why are you thinking about sinking my ship, though? Sunny chuckled. No reason. I'm just bored and curious. Jet sighed. Well, you might be right. Honestly, I feel like we haven't discovered everything that the night garden can do yet, by far, or at least what it could do. It might not look like it from the outside, but this ship is actually heavily damaged. And in a state of disrepair. It has been from the very day the Nightwalker conquered it, after thousands of years of neglect. And none of us is powerful enough or knows enough to fix it. She glanced at the vast expanse of dark water. The rest can't tell, but as its captain, I feel it every time I step into the runic circle. How tired and worn down countless of its parts are. Jet lingered for a moment, then smiled. In any case, I am not planning to send the night garden into the depths. I spent several months as a sea nomad in my third nightmare, you know? Living on the back of an aquatic monster, with no land anywhere in sight. In my experience, all things that come from the depths tend to try to eat you, so thanks, but no thanks. Sunny gave her a funny look. Hey, I think we have the same experience. Actually, I hate water. The only thing worse than water is deep water, I'd say. Jet raised an eyebrow. Then what are you doing in the middle of the storm sea? Sunny smiled. Well, it's because my greed tramples my fear. Every damn time. Turning away from the dark expanse of fresh water, Sunny looked at Jet. His vision had improved enough to actually discern her features, which was a good sign. So, he figured that there was no sense in postponing what he wanted to do anymore. Anyway. I am going to explore what the night garden is dreaming about. Care to join me? Jet remained silent for a while, then shrugged. It's my ship. Of course, I am going to join you. Sunny nodded. Let's go, then. As he said that, Nightmare silently rose from the shadows and stared at Jet with his frightening crimson eyes. She stared back, wisps of mist drifting around her. Sunny, your horse is looking at me funny. Fastening the overpriced saddle, he smiled. He's just happy to see you. Right, Nightmare? Nightmare snorted, revealing his steel wolf-like fangs for a moment. Jet cleared her throat. Yeah, I don't think this is it. Jumping into the sad. Sunny looked down at her and offered her his hand. Climb up. Don't worry, he doesn't bite. I mean, he does, but only when he wants to kill someone. So, relax. Giving him a dark look, Jet took his hand and climbed to sit behind him. Why do you have a transcendent terror as a horse, even? Sunny grinned. Well, if you must know, it's because I endured myriad excruciating deaths in a maze of nightmares, broke free through sheer stubbornness, and then killed him viciously. So, this terror is my horse now. Hold on tight. As Jet wrapped her arms around his waist, Sunny sent Nightmare forward and commanded him to use the Dreamwalker attribute. Original content can be found at novi.fire.net. The next moment, they disappeared from the shore of the dark lake. Chapter 2598 Dreams of the Night Garden Plus, Turn Off Reset. In the night garden's dream, it was a tree. A towering tree that stood upon the surface of a calm sea, bathing in starlight and caressed by warm winds. Millions of leaves rustled on its branches peacefully, echoing the distant murmur of the gentle waves. Far away, storm clouds were gathering with the promise of a cleansing rain. Nightmare appeared on a wide branch of the titanic tree, surrounded by shadows. Sunny glanced around and remained silent for a while. An odd expression appeared on his face. Well, that is odd. Jet, who seemed quite uncomfortable atop a horse, let go of his waist and jumped down. Touching the weathered bark of the enormous branch briefly, she looked up and asked in an incredulous tone. What? Traveling to the dream of an ancient living ship? Sunny shook his head. No? That's perfectly normal. He paused for a few moments, casting his shadow sense far and wide, then sighed. It's just that when I follow nightmare into someone's dream, it is usually, a nightmare. Relaxing a little, Sunny dismounted and patted his tenebrous steed on the shoulder. Full of horrors, peril, and nightmarish things. It's very rarely that I encounter a dream that is so peaceful. The dream of the night garden was indeed tranquil. Considering what the ancient vessel had lived through and witnessed, Sunny was fully prepared to face unimaginable horrors, hideous depth dwellers, devastating calamities, and perhaps even an angry god or two. But instead, there was nothing but a stunning night sky and a calm sea. No horrors were hiding beneath the waves, and nothing too monstrous to describe was watching them from above with alien eyes. He hesitated for a little while, studying the towering tree they were standing upon. It was far taller than the Soul Devourer had been in its last moments, but nowhere near as colossal as the World Tree. If he had to compare it to anything, it would be the giant tree growing at the center of Ariel's game. Still, it was interesting to see that the night garden saw itself as a tree, at least in its dreams. A thriving tree, at that. There were some parts of it that seemed diseased, with gray bark and rotting branches. But largely, the night garden seemed to be full of vibrancy and life. The branches were brimming with young buds, ready to sprout new leaves and flowers. Here and there, succulent fruits could be seen, bathing in the starlight. Jet glanced around as well, her gaze eventually landing on the largest and most delicious-looking fruit, which hung not too far away from them. It had a bluish sheen to it, emanating a cold air and surrounded by ethereal wisps of smoke. Her expression changed subtly. Sunny hesitated for a few moments. You are not planning on eating it, are you? These are not real fruit. They are simply a dream, so they won't satiate you. As much as Sunny wanted to believe that eating a mystical dream fruit would grant him some kind of power, he knew that it was wishful thinking. This was a mundane dream after all, even if a mystical being was dreaming it, not a nightmare created by the spell. So even if he had received the soul weed by eating a fruit in a nightmare, eating one in this dream would not benefit him in any way. And since the night garden was dreaming peacefully, there was nothing here for nightmare, the shadow, to battle and subjugate here, either. There seemed to be nothing for him to earn in the dream of the night garden. Jet remained silent for a while, then slowly shook her head. No. It's just that. She hesitated for a bit, then pointed to the stunning fruit. I think that's me. Sunny blinked a couple of times. Pardon? Jet nodded. Yes. I think that this fruit is meant to represent me. Sunny's expression only grew more incredulous. For original chapters go to novelfire.net. Asterisk is she, comparing herself to a beautiful, succulent fruit? WH. At is happening, asterisk. Jet scoffed. I don't know what you are thinking about, but please stop. Instead, think about what the night garden sees itself as. She raised her hand, gesturing to the branches of the great tree that surrounded them. For us, it is a mysterious vessel that shelters us, and which we control. But as far as the night garden seems to be concerned, it is a tree. What does that make us, its passengers, then? She smiled faintly. I believe it thinks about us as parts of itself, which it must protect and nurture. Well, I suppose the night garden can't actually think. So, saying that it feels that way about us would probably be more correct. Jet pointed to the rustling leaves. Each leaf represents a person living on the night garden. While some of us, those who are of higher ranks, are represented by the flowers and the fruit. Sunny glanced around, bewilderment apparent on his face, then looked at the biggest, most beautiful, and most delicious-looking fruit. So, what you're saying is that the night garden likes you the most? Jet coughed, then offered him a nonchalant shrug. Naturally. Because I'm the captain. Or perhaps it was simply because the night garden had a soft spot for her. Sunny would not be surprised if it did. Soul Reaper was quite a likable person, after all. He could attest to that fact himself. He remained silent for a while, contemplating. If Jet was correct and the Titanic ship considered its passengers as leaves, flowers, and fruit that grew on its branches and had to be nurtured, then it must have been terribly lonely for all these years, including the short span of years when only the members of the House of Night populated its spacious decks and cavernous holds. Not to mention the time when the only being aboard it was Mordred. The dreams of the night garden must have been far more wistful back then. It's nice that the ship is content now, I guess. In any case, that information was of no help to him. As far as searching for the traces left behind by Weaver was concerned. Unless, of course. Suddenly feeling paranoid, Sunny gulped. Hey, Jet, you don't think that we'll find a giant, rotten fruit infested by repulsive maggots somewhere in here, and that would be how we learn that some dreadful, detestable horror has been hiding aboard the night garden the whole time? Jet gave him a long look. Then, she turned away with a deadpan expression. You know, Sunny, you should really learn to keep some thoughts to yourself. I don't know if we'll find such a fruit, but if we do. She smiled darkly. I will definitely be blaming you. Chapter 2599 The Flaw in Our Stars Plus, Turn Off Reset. For better or for worse, they did not find such a harrowing fruit on the branches of the night garden. It was fortunate, of course, that there were no terrible abominations hiding aboard the ancient ship, but Sunny found himself facing a dilemma. The problem was that they did not find anything of note at all while exploring the wondrous dream. It was just quiet and tranquil. The rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of the waves, the gentle wind, and the falling rays of silver starlight, that was all there was to the dream of the night garden, which slumbered peacefully as its great mass sailed the tumultuous waters of the storm sea. Perhaps it was only to be expected, considering that the being dreaming that dream was not exactly sentient, let alone sapient. At least someone is dreaming peacefully, Sunny sighed. The tree was immense, but it was not vast enough for a sovereign and a saint to miss something important. Standing on one of the lower branches, Sunny glanced at the calm surface of the distant sea below. The roots of the night garden must have extended far down. Was he going to have to dive into the depths, after all? As Sunny was considering his options with a sullen face, the leaves rustled, and Jet landed softly on the weathered bark beside him. As she did, he observed something curious. The leaves, as well as the smaller branches of the night garden, seemed to bend slightly toward her, as if drawn to her tantalizing figure. If that was not the night garden playing favorites and giving its captain special treatment, then Sunny did not know what was. He might have been sulking a little because there did not seem to be a fruit anywhere here representing him. Sunny knew for a fact that he was quite delicious. Why else would countless creatures have tried to eat him? What a silly ship. Jet straightened and gave him a neutral look. Well? Did you find anything? Sunny coughed, asked by his thoughts, and slowly shook his head. Not really. Ah. I am starting to doubt my initial assumption. What about you? Have you discovered something? They had split up after the initial sweep. Sunny went to explore the lower branches of the night garden, while Jet climbed to the top. Nightmare followed her in the shadows, just in case something did happen and she needed help. But nothing had happened, in the end. Jet hesitated for a few moments. I am not sure. Maybe? Sunny raised an eyebrow. How do you mean? She considered something, then gestured up. Follow me. It will be easier to show you. He did with a shrug. Together, they climbed the great tree. Of course, the night garden was too tall, standing higher than the most towering mountain on earth, to be scaled like an ordinary tree, or even an ordinary mountain. But Sunny and Jet were not ordinary people either. They leapt from one branch to another, covering hundreds of meters of vertical distance with each leap and only pausing for a brief moment before taking the next one. The great branches streaked past them, and the leaves rustled from their passing, disturbed by the turbulent currents of wind. Although not the most practical, this way of ascending the immense height of the night garden was the simplest. Well, and it was also a bit exhilarating. Look at me, having fun in a giant shipstream. Sunny smiled slightly, thinking that he understood why Nightmare enjoyed galloping at terrible speed so much. Some time later, they finally reached the top of the huge tree. Its vast trunk was thinner there, and the canopy was not as thick, revealing the clear picture of the gorgeous night sky. Sunny suddenly felt wary, looking around with a tense expression. He almost expected to see an enormous nest, and find a murderous egg laying on the bed of spiderwebs inside, but luckily, the vile thieving bird did not seem to have visited the dreams of the night garden in the past. Sun. New York lingered for a few moments. What exactly am I looking at? Jet pointed up once again. The sky. He frowned, then followed her finger to the dark vista of the night sky. There was no light pollution in the dream of the night garden to make stars seem feeble and pale, and since Sunny and Jet were quite high, they looked huge. The breathtaking tapestry of silver stars stretched above the great tree, countless of them connected by long trails of cosmic fog. Altogether, the stars and the shimmering nebulae looked like a painting drawn by the hand of a genius artist, their vast expanse suffused with darkness, light, and mystery in equal measure. Sunny's eyes glistened. Wait. Jet shrugged. They don't look like any of the stars I have seen. And, how should I put it, there's something peculiar about them. It is as if there is a pattern hidden in the constellations, although if there is, I don't know what kind. Sunny lingered for a while, the stars reflecting in his onyx eyes, and then smiled faintly. That's all right. I know what the pattern is. She looked at him in surprise. You do? Sunny nodded. Yes. It's a weave. Indeed, there was an image of a mysterious spell weave hidden in the stars of the night garden's dream. No one except for Sunny would have discerned the subtle order in the seemingly chaotic scattering of constellations and the trails of radiant fog blooming around them, and even then, it would have taken him a great amount of time to decipher the pattern without mind weave. But Sunny was quite an accomplished weaver by now, and he did possess mind weave. So, he recognized the anchors of the celestial spellweave almost immediately. After that, tracing all its twists and turns was not that hard. The spellweave was vast and intricately complicated, endlessly elegant in its design, and daunting. It felt like something the spell would weave, but was even more refined. Despite its complexity and scale, however, it was simple. Easily within the boundaries of what Sunny could replicate. Jet raised an eyebrow. A weave? Reluctantly looking away from the radiant pattern hidden in the depths of the dark sky, Sunny remained silent for a moment and then nodded. Rather, it is an image of a weave. Spellweaves are what make the memories and the echoes work. They are a form of long-lost sorcery that a select few practiced once, in the ancient past. That sorcery originates from Weaver, the demon of fate, and Weaver did not create it to be used by the masses. So, unlike runic sorcery and shaping, not just anyone can master even its basics. Jet gave him a dubious look. So, what's the use of this hidden pattern? NW novel chapters are published on novifire.net. Sunny smiled. Well, as it happens, it's quite useful. Because I just happen to be the only weaver in existence. And I haven't just mastered the basics, as far as weaver sorcery goes, I am quite the master. Looking at the starlit sky once again, he said in a subdued tone. What I am trying to say is that I can use this pattern as a blueprint to create some kind of spell. There was the question of whether he should, of course. Blindly giving shape to a mysterious spell hidden in the dreams of a living ship was not exactly a wise course of action, it smelled of recklessness, rather. But who was he kidding? Sunny had come to the night garden to find a clue leading to a fragment of Weaver's lineage, and now, he found the blueprint of a spellweave conveniently hidden on the ship's dreams. One had to be a fool not to realize that this spell had been left here by Weaver to give his future heir a sign. Jet frowned. And what will that spell do? Sunny looked at her and grinned. There is only one way to find out, is there? In the end, it took Sunny a few days to complete the mysterious spell weave. He had secluded himself in Jet's garden and dedicated himself fully to weaving, meticulously recreating the vast intricacy of the pattern Weaver had hidden in the starlit sky. He used strings of shadow essence to shape the strings, and the soul shards of sea monsters Jet and Nightmare hunted for him to form the anchors of the complicated pattern. Since the weave needed a vessel to exist, at least as far as Sunny was concerned, he used a long branch from one of the sacred trees Jet had transplanted into her garden, which he fashioned into a staff. All of them were children of the tree growing on the chain breaker and quite young, but their wood was resilient and possessed mystical qualities needed to contain a powerful enchantment. When the weave was complete, Sunny and Jet looked at the simple wooden staff he was holding with complicated expressions. This thing is not going to blow up my ship, is it? Sunny hesitated for a moment. What? No, of course not. As Jet let out a relieved sigh, he added. At best, it will blow up a small part of your ship. Jet's icy blue eyes widened, but before she could say anything, Sunny poured his essence into the staff and activated its enchantment. In the next moment, the night garden did not explode. Countless stars in the night sky exploded instead. Oops. Dozens of constellations shimmering on the vast velvet expanse of the night sky exploded. Some stars were extinguished, while some bloomed with shining auroras, as if experiencing a glorious moment of radiant brilliance as they collapsed in a splendid display of self-destruction. Or at least they seemed to be. Wait, that does not make any sense. The enchantment Sunny had activated was consuming a vast amount of his essence, but still, he was not powerful enough to extinguish countless stars. Even if he was, nothing would have changed in the night sky. The stars scattered across its dark expanse were unfathomably far away, after all. Their light took years to travel across the vast emptiness of space, at least that was how things worked in the waking world. Of course, it was theoretically possible that the spell left behind by Weaver had reached through time and destroyed these stars at various points in the distant past, so that the spectacle of their passing became visible all at once just now. But that seemed like too much effort, even for the treacherous demon of fate. Especially since there seemed to be no obvious result, beneficial or otherwise, to the strange change in the night sky. It was pretty to look at, but beyond that, nothing seemed to be happening. Sunny, what the hell did you do? He lingered for a few moments, studying the strange pattern of the vanished and blazing stars, then cleared his throat. I am not entirely sure. I just activated the enchantment. Far below, on the decks of the night garden, people were gathering and gesturing at the sky, surprised by the beautiful sight. They seemed to be enjoying the unexpected spectacle quite a bit. Sunny looked at the wooden staff in his hand, feeling it consume his essence continuously. He would not have been able to sustain this mysterious enchantment for a long time as a saint, but now that he was a supreme, it was of no consequence. More essence poured into his soul, replenishing his reserves almost instantly. The enchantment does not seem to be perilous. At the same time, I have no idea what its purpose is. How mysterious. Jet sighed, then looked at the shimmering night sky with a thoughtful expression. She contemplated its dark depths for a while, then said in a hesitant tone. Well, whatever its purpose is, it must be connected to the storm sea. Sunny raised an eyebrow. In what way? Jet looked at him with a neutral expression. You don't know much about where we are, do you? When Sunny responded, his tone was a little offended. I know quite a lot, actually. It's just that most of my knowledge about the storm sea is theoretical, since I consciously tried to stay as far away from this place as possible. Nothing good ever happens when I am near large bodies of water, and since this one is the largest and most terrifying of them all, you can imagine my reluctance to get entangled with it. He gave her an indignant stare and thought back to what he knew about the storm sea. After a short pause, Sunny added. Do you mean that it has to do with navigation? Jet nodded. Yes, the storm sea is not like any other place in the dream realm. It's quite treacherous, as far as navigating its waters goes, and I don't mean because of the terrible abominations, the harrowing storms, and the thick mist that tends to obscure everything for days, or even weeks on end. She sighed. Rather, space itself behaves strangely in the storm sea. Nothing ever stays in the same place for long here, and things tend to shift around in relation to each other. You might sail in a straight line for a week, and end up in the same spot you began from. That is the best-case scenario. You might also plot a course to a safe harbor, but end up in previously unexplored waters that teem with all kinds of ghastly nightmare creatures and unimaginable horrors. That happens far more frequently. Jet looked at the starlit sky. That is why Nightwalkers are so important. Sunny knew that the Nightwalkers, a title given to certain members of the House of Night in honor of its founder, were able to guide ships through the mists of the storm sea. In fact, they did the same for mundane ships in the Indian Ocean and were generally good at finding their way around. That was not surprising, considering that they had inherited the lineage of Storm God, who was also known as the goddess of the black skies, the goddess of depths, oceans, darkness, stars, travel, and guidance. And disaster. In any case, he knew that the ability to navigate the sea by stars was one of the inherent abilities of many members of the House of Night. The skies above the storm sea were not mundane, either. They were as mystical and treacherous as the misty waters below, so not just anyone could observe them to plot a reliable course. And since the mysterious enchantment Weaver had left behind seemed to have changed the geography of the night sky. Do you think that this staff shows a path to somewhere? Discover more novels at novelfire.net. That was the most reasonable conclusion he could make. Weaver had left an image of a strange spellweave in the skies that the night garden dreamed about. Once realized, this spellweave altered the real sky, making it seem as if some stars had been extinguished, while some burned brighter. The stars were the only way to navigate the storm sea, and therefore, the beautiful spectacle above them could be a map, of sorts. Sunny had no idea where that map led to, but he was pretty sure that the fragment of Weaver's lineage he was searching for would be there, in that mysterious place. Jet lingered for a while, then shrugged. Actually, I can navigate the storm sea as well, somewhat. That is one of the privileges granted to the captain of the night garden. But I am not very experienced in reading the stars yet, so, I can't really tell if this enchantment shows a path to somewhere. She looked at him, and smiled slightly. However, I know a few people who can.